On November 30th, 2021, in less than 10 minutes, 4 students were killed inside Oxford High School. But this story doesn't start with the gunfire. It starts with warnings. It starts with decisions made just hours earlier. And it starts with the path that was already taking shape long before anyone stepped into that hallway. Because what happened that day wasn't just an act of violence. It was a chain of events that built toward it, piece by piece, until there was no stopping it. Outlaws and gunslingers. Real stories, the way they actually happened. Before November 30th, 2021, Oxford High School, they were seen as an above-average school in Michigan's public education system. State testing showed about 35% of students proficient in math. It's not that great.
No.
The community itself had a reputation for being family-oriented, with places like Lakeville Lake nearby and a strong focus on local education. And up to that point, there had been no major incidents of school violence recorded in official reports. Ever.
Nice. Oxford High School been using an active shooter training program known as ALICE, which stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, Evacuate. Unlike older lockdown models, this one focused on more proactive strategies, teaching students and staff how to create distance from a threat, use noise as a distraction, make real-time decisions instead of staying completely still. While teachers were also trained to use a device called Night Lock, which is a barrier installed at the base of a classroom doors that could physically prevent anybody from opening them. And those have been installed throughout the school back in 2017, about 3 years before Michigan law would eventually require that kind of added security.
Now, why would they be installing this kind of stuff?
Right.
3 years before Michigan required it, and when they have had no record of violence up until this point.
And we just read the demographics and the poverty rate.
Right.
Despite those measures, there had been already a sense of unease leading up to the 30th of November 2021. Because according to students and parents, rumors about a possible mass shooting had been circulating around the school beforehand. Serious enough that some students actually chose to stay home that day. And earlier that same month, after a bizarre act of vandalism, where someone threw a severed deer head off the school roof into the courtyard, administrators sent a message out to the parents saying they were aware of rumors and were looking into them. But ultimately found no credible threat. Of course, just a dead deer head thrown off. And Oakland County Sheriff.
To a live one.
Right. Right. And Oakland County Sheriff Michael Bouchard later confirmed that his office had also not received information pointing to a real or imminent danger before the shooting took place.
Well, earlier that day, before any shots were fired, a teacher at Oxford High School found a disturbing note on the desk of a 15-year-old named Ethan Crumbly. It was covered in drawings of a handgun, ammunition, and blood, along with the phrases that read, "The thoughts won't stop. Help me.
Uh-oh.
I have zero help for my dysfunction, and my life is useless," which immediately raised concern among staff, leading school officials to contact his parents, James and Jennifer Crumbly, who came in for a meeting around mid-morning where administrators recommended that their son receive counseling within 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
But ultimately allowed the parents to decide not to take him home or even have his backpack searched, after which he was sent back to class.
Oh, my goodness.
Just hours later, 12:51 p.m., surveillance cameras captured Crumbly walking out of a boys' bathroom at the south end of the school's 200 hallway without his backpack. And that's when he pulled a 9mm 6-hour SP-2022 semi-automatic pistol from his waistband, which we'll see is a gun his father had purchased just days earlier.
Oh, wow.
And within seconds, he turned and began firing into the hallway, hitting students as they moved between classes. Then he continued down the 200 hallway, moved east, and started firing into classrooms near rooms 245, 247, 240, and 238, before shifting direction and heading into the other areas near rooms 224, 220, and 215. Then at 12:53 p.m., he paused the reload by swapping magazines, continued to fire as he moved, ultimately discharging about 30 rounds while deliberately targeting students in hallways, classrooms, and even a cubby storage area.
Jeez. By 12:54, he entered another boy's bathroom off 400 hallway, shot and killed one victim, briefly encountered another before backing off. And the active shooting continued for 7 more minutes. Probably like that kid, huh? Stretching to about 1 p.m. This is when he came back out of the bathroom. He was spotted by deputies who had just arrived and surrendered without any resistance after dropping the weapon, still carrying a loaded magazine. While emergency calls already began flooding in, with the first coming at 12:52, Oakland County deputies arriving at the school by 12:56. Yeah, that's pretty good. Entered the building a minute later to begin clearing it and searching for victims. Deputies from the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, along with school resource officer, were on the way within minutes of those first calls coming in, arriving between 4 and 7 minutes after the shooting began. The first units pulling up at 12:56 and entering the school through doors 7 and 8 around 12:58 to move toward the threat. And by 1 p.m., Ethan Crimley had already given himself up in a 200 series hallway near a bathroom, dropping his 9mm handgun, which was still loaded.
Mm-hmm.
This is where he was taken into custody by the school resource officer and a deputy, while the weapon itself was fully secured a short time later at 1:20 p.m.
Took him 20 minutes.
Holy shit. And by 1:44 p.m., investigators confirmed that he had acted alone, allowing law enforcement to lock down the perimeter and begin clearing the building room by room until the entire school was officially secured at 2:34 p.m. This brought an end to an active shooting phase that had lasted roughly 9 minutes from the first shots to his surrender. 9 minutes is a long time.
Yeah. In those critical moments, deputies were not just searching for the shooter, they were also acting as first responders, immediately provided medical aid, applying tourniquets to the wounded, including a hall monitor at 12:59 p.m., even transporting victims themselves when needed, with Tate Meyer being rushed in a patrol vehicle at 1:09 p.m., while emergency medical crews from the Oxford Fire Department and EMS that had initially been staged at a nearby Meyer parking lot until the scene was confirmed safe, who finally entered the school between 1:05 and 1:07 after a roughly 4.5-minute delay from dispatch. Then additional paramedics, they arrived by 1:18 to treat victims on site before transporting them to nearby hospitals such as McLaren, Oakland, and Cornwall Health, William Beaumont University Hospital. That's where 7 survivors, 6 students, and 1 teacher, they were treated for gunshot wounds. Well, sadly, 4 students, Madison Baldwin, Tate Meyer, Hannah St. Juliana, and Justin Schillen, ultimately died from their injuries. Well, once the shooter was in custody, evacuation efforts, they began at 1:16 p.m., about 1,000 students directed out of doors 4, 7, and 8 toward the Meyer reunification site, where deputies coordinated the release of students to parents starting at 1:30 p.m., requiring identification, while another roughly 800 students remained secured inside initially until they could safely be released. And by about 2:31 p.m., school buses and private vehicles were all used to move people out of the area, all under an incident command structure that had been established by 1:20 p.m. under Lieutenant Hill, bringing together law enforcement, fire, and EMS, more than 20 in total. And although later reviews pointed to issues like radio congestion, unclear transmissions, and the lack of a fully integrated rescue task force, those challenges did not stop the response from containing the situation and preventing further loss of life. Like we said, 4 students lost their lives in the shooting. Madison Baldwin, 17-year-old senior, Tate Meyer, a 16-year-old sophomore, Justin Schilling, a 17-year-old junior, and Hannah St. Juliana, a 14-year-old freshman. For 3 of them, Baldwin, Meyer, and St. Juliana, death came at the scene after they were struck multiple times, while Justin Schilling, he held on just a bit longer, but died the very next day, December 1st, from the injuries he had suffered. Despite the scale of the attack and the number of people caught in it, no teachers or staff members were among those killed. Those 7 people wounded, they were all obviously struck by gunfire, and the injuries varied widely in severity. Some victims suffered gunshot wounds to the chest, abdomen, and limbs, while one student was placed on a ventilator in critical condition after being hit in the torso. Others experienced immediate loss of mobility, including paralysis in their legs right after being shot. Among these injured was teacher Molly Darnell, who was hit in the shoulder while trying to secure a classroom door after encountering the shooter. And for many of the survivors, the impact didn't end that day. His long-term effects included chronic pain, multiple surgeries, and lasting mobility issues, with student Kylie Osage, who was shot in the back, later developing spinal instability that required a complex surgical procedure in July of 2023 to stabilize her spine and reduce her pain, followed by a rehabilitation that even included equine therapy, while other students continued to deal with lingering physical challenges, including one who described being unable to move their legs immediately after being shot and facing an ongoing recovery process. Plus, Darnell herself has spoken about permanent damage to her shoulder that has affected her ability to continue her work as an educator.
Physical wounds were only part of it, because many of the survivors, the psychological impact ran just as deep, if not deeper. Students and staff dealing with post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and disruption to everyday life that did not just go away once the shooting ended. Something that came out clearly during victim impact statements at Ethan's sentencing in December 2023, survivors described how that day continued to shape how they think, how they feel, and how they move throughout the world even today, including Kylie Osage, who talked about how the experience forced her to develop a kind of resilience, but also left behind emotional scars that have not fully healed. While across community mental health support became a major focus, organizations like Oakland Family Services stepping in to provide trauma counseling for both the injured and the broader student body, helping people process grief, fear, survivor's guilt. And for teacher Molly Darnell, the trauma was just severe enough that she had described living with constant hypervigilance and life-changing psychological effects, ultimately leading to her file a lawsuit against the school district over what she felt was inadequate support after the incident. Ethan Robert Crumbly, just a 15-year-old sophomore, going to Oxford High School in Oxford Township, Michigan. November 30th, 2021 was the day of the shooting. He lived there with his parents, James Crumbly, who ran a machine shop business, and Jennifer Crumbly, who worked in real estate, while also helping manage parts of the family's business. And the family had been in the area for quite some time, including previously living in Walters Lake and nearby Clarkson. These are some rich folks, huh? Or at least one neighbor later described Ethan as a kid who seemed isolated and unhappy growing up. Inside that home, firearms were now unfamiliar, and in fact, just days before the shooting, his parents had purchased a 6-hour 9mm handgun, which is the gun that he used, and they have taken it already to the range and they fired it, something that would later become a central point in the case. While prosecutors will go on to describe the household as chaotic, pointing to text messages Ethan sent to his mother, talking about seeing demons and ghosts. Oh no. Along with videos he had recorded showing him harming animals. Ooh. Though his parents said they were not aware of how serious these behaviors were and did not seek out therapy for him. When he's harming animals, during the legal process, experts offered conflicting reviews about his mental state, with one forensic psychologist describing him as resembling what they call a feral child due to what they believed as negligence during his early development. While a defense expert pushed back on that, saying there was no evidence of psychosis or any formal psychiatric disorder, Ethan himself admitted during evaluations that he had never directly asked his parents for mental health treatment.
Why would he?
He even lied to a friend about trying to get help.
Now, despite everything that would later come out, there were no prior arrests or official school disciplinary records showing violent behavior. On the surface, he appeared to be living a fairly typical teenage life. Took part in things like a bowling league, keeping a journal where he wrote about his frustrations. While his academic performance at the high school was described as average, no signs of expulsion, special education placement, or anything that would even have immediately marked him as a serious concern within the school system. 4 days before the shooting, November 26th, which was Black Friday, James Crumbly went to Acme Shooting Goods in Oxford and purchased a 9mm, the gun that he used. According to investigators, that gun was bought as a gift for his son, Ethan, who had actually given his father money toward it and had already chosen the model during an earlier visit to the store. And this is
after they caught him hurting animals and shit like that, and you're going to give him a pistol?
Well, no, they didn't say that until they checked his phone afterward.
Oh.
At the time, Michigan law did not require firearms in the home to be securely stored, so the weapon was kept in an unlocked dresser drawer under clothing in the parents' bedroom. On the morning of the shooting, he went into that drawer, took the gun, hid it in his backpack along with two 15-round magazines loaded. And this wasn't something he stumbled into, because in journal entries written before the attack, he already laid out his plan, writing that he intended to search for the gun his father had hidden, and showing that he knew exactly where it was kept and what ammo was available. In the months, though, leading up to that day, he had also gone to a local shooting range multiple times with his dad, including visits just days before the shooting, where he practiced firing that same gun he would use in the shooting. With surveillance footage from the range later showing him handling and shooting the weapon during those sessions.
Right.
And by the time of the attack, when investigators confirmed he fired at least 30 rounds, authorities, they noted that his ability to handle the gun reflected just a little bit of familiarity and practice that matched those earlier range visits.
Night before the shooting, 29th November 2021, Ethan Crumbly recorded a video where he laid out exactly what he planned to do. He openly talked about his intentions to go into Oxford High School the next day and kill students. He framed it in a way to give a meaning what he saw as a pointless life by causing as much damage as possible. Investigators later went through his journal. They found that this was not something he had just decided in that very moment. There was pages and pages and pages filled with detailed preparation, including notes about ammo, references to past school shooters he wanted to imitate, and repeated expressions of isolation mixed with a desire to gain attention and notoriety through violence. Some of the entries went even further, describing disturbing and highly specific fantasies of stalking, assaulting, torturing, and killing a particular female classmate, pointing to a level of premeditation that went well beyond general anger or frustration and into something far more deliberate. And when authorities examined his online activity, it backed all that up. Showed searches in the weeks leading up to the attack related to ammo, how mass shootings are carried out, and other violent material. What stood out to investigators was that none of his writings or recordings pointed to any political or religious motive or outside of grievances. And instead, everything circled back to himself with statements like, "I'm going to be the next school shooter," showing that he was looking to follow in the footsteps of others for personal validation. And prosecutors would later argue all of this, the video, the journal, the search history, and made it clear that this was a planned act carried out with intent, not something that just happened that morning. He was like, "Oh," or something that was driven by sudden break from reality. No, this dude's been planning.
Well, like we said before, Ethan, he had not received any formal mental health diagnosis or treatment, even though there were warning signs that something was off, including reported hallucinations and a noticeable decline in his school performance. But as parents, they viewed these issues as stress-related rather than something that required professional intervention. And in later court filings, they maintained that position, arguing he wasn't even mentally ill, even going as far as trying to obtain his records to push back against accusations of negligence, while continuing to deny that he ever needed therapy in the first place. After the shooting, when investigators recovered his journal, it painted a much clearer picture of how far back the plan actually went, with entries stretching back months that laid out his intent in detail, which included notes about searching for ammo his father had hidden, repeated visions of violence, and statements like, I am dead inside. I will cause the biggest school shooting in Michigan's history," along with lists of items he believed he needed, such as extra magazines and a pistol, all of which pointed to a steady buildup rather than a sudden decision, clearly. Though none of these write-ins had been known to school officials before the attack, clearly, why would they? There's
Right.
his personal journal.
Right.
In the aftermath, an independent review found that, based on the total number of warning signs, Oxford Community Schools should have initiated a formal threat assessment process in line with standard school safety guidelines, instead of relying on more informal evaluations. While defenders of the school, they say staff members who later testify in court, they say that without direct threat or a clear violation of school policy, what were they going to do?
Right. Really can't.
They couldn't do anything. After his arrest, though, he was brought before a magistrate and arraigned on homicide and attempted homicide charges so he could continue to be held in custody. Though he was not initially charged as an adult, but that changed quickly. On December 1st, prosecutors did file a series of serious charges against him, which included terrorism causing death, first-degree murder, assault with intent to murder, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, with the possibility of additional charges as the investigation continued. And at this time, the Associated Press, they note that this appeared to be the first instance in United States history where a terrorism charge was applied to a school shooting.
Right.
With Michigan law defining that charge as an act intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, in this case, obviously, the high school community. Crumbly, he was then formally charged as an adult. Judge Nancy Karniak entered a not guilty plea on his behalf, ordering that he be held without bond and transferred to the Oakley County Jail, while also setting some key dates in the case, including a probable cause conference scheduled for December 13th and a preliminary examination for December 20th.
Right.
During this process, the court ultimately appointed an attorney to represent him after his piece of shit parents had hired legal representation for themselves, but not for him.
Right.
But left him on his own, just like they did for his whole childhood. That should prove everything for you, right?
My goodness. At a probable cause conference, 13th December, Judge Nancy Karniak pushed the preliminary examination back to January 7, 2022, giving prosecutors more time to go through the growing amount of evidence. And during that hearing, Crumbly's court-appointed attorney raised concerns about him being held in an adult facility. He argued that he could hear other adult inmates, which would violate Michigan rules for minors in custody, right? But that request to move him back to a juvenile detention center denied.
He's being recharged as an adult, so.
Though Assistant Prosecutor Mark Keast said he would reach out to the jail about those conditions. January 7th arrived. Crumbly waived his right to the probable cause hearing altogether and was officially bound over for trial. And just a few days later, 12th of January, a formal not guilty plea was entered on his behalf during arraignment. Legal strategy soon shifted. 26th of January, his attorneys filed notice that he intended to pursue an insanity defense and requested a standard evaluation of his criminal responsibility through the Center of Forensic Psychiatry. And that remained the direction of the case for months until 24th of October, 2022, when Crumbly reversed course. He said, you know what? I'm done. I'm guilty. All charges, and withdrew the insanity, while also admitting during questioning that the gun used in the attack had been purchased with his own money and was not secured on the day of the shooting. Wow, 29th September 2023, Judge Kwame Rowe ruled that Ethan Crumbly was eligible to be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, explaining that while his age and the issues inside his home were factors worth considering, they did not come close to outweighing the severity of what he had done. And Rowe also pointed to behavior during his time in jail including that incident where Crumbly accessed violent material online through a hacked tablet. Oh my. As evidence that his fixation on violence had not gone away. How the fuck do you get a tablet? Why the fuck these people have all kinds of stuff in jail?
I mean, it's a tablet. He was probably taking something. I don't know. Maybe like for good behavior time or something.
Maybe he still had to do school.
Maybe, yeah.
Because he was a minor at the time of the crime, he was entitled to a hearing under the 2012 United States Supreme Court decision in Miller versus Alabama. This decision requires courts to consider whether juveniles should have a chance at parole after serving at least 25 years.
No, not for you, buddy.
And with that process in place, a formal sentencing date, December 8, 2023, was set. Though the final outcome came a day later, on the 9th of December, when it was announced that Crumbly had been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And just before that sentence was handed down, he addressed the courtroom. He apologized, saying that any punishment the victims' families asked for was one he believed should be imposed on him. And he also added that he was truly sorry. And after he turned 18 on April 28, 2024, he was transferred to Oaks Correctional Facility in Manistee, Michigan.
June 7th, there's going to be some appeals. June 7th, 2024, appellate attorneys for Ethan, they filed a motion seeking the court to allow him to withdraw his guilty plea and be resentenced, arguing that he had received ineffective assistance of counsel. As part of that claim, they raised new information that had not been presented during the original case, which included allegations that his mom consumed alcohol during pregnancy, which they said could have led to fetal alcohol spectrum disorder and caused cognitive and adaptive impairments. And they further argued that Judge Kwame Rowe failed to make sure Crumbly fully understood the consequences of pleading guilty, given those potential impairments and his mental health history. December 19th, Rowe rejected both requests, stating that the plea had been, of course he's going to reject the request that goes against him, stated that the plea had been knowingly, voluntarily, and accurately made, and there were no issues with how it was handled in court. The case then moved to the appeals level, May 6, 2025. The Michigan Court of Appeals dismissed his attempt to withdraw their guilty plea, while also denying a separate appeal challenging his life sentence, leaving the original conviction and punishment in place.
Damn right.
We're not done yet, though. After the charges were announced against Ethan, Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDowell made it clear the investigation wasn't stopping with him. She told reporters her office was also looking at whether his parents could face criminal charges tied to what happened, emphasizing that responsible gun ownership is a critical part of preventing tragedies like this.
Right.
And that people who fail to properly secure their firearms should be held accountable. Just a few days later, December 3rd, she followed through on that, holding a press conference where she announced that both parents were indeed being charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, arguing that their failure to secure the gun used in the shooting directly contributed to the death. And at the time, it stood out as an extremely rare move because this has literally never happened in any other school shooting case ever. Even though there's been similar cases where parents probably should have.
Right. Crazy. After charges were filed against Jennifer and James, they escalated quickly when authorities realized the two had left the Oxford Township area and had not shown up as expected to meet with their attorneys and turn themselves in. This prompted...
How do you not have people watching them?
Right. This prompted an alert to be issued just hours later as law enforcement began trying to locate them, with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office saying that multiple agencies, including the United States Marshals Service and a local fugitive apprehension team, they're all involved in the search. While the FBI also clarified that it was not actively participating at that point.
It's not juicy enough for these guys.
We're watching closely. Not long after, the Crumbly's attorneys told the Detroit Free Press that their clients had not fled, but just instead left town for their own safety and planned to return for an arraignment. But when the scheduled 4 p.m. court appearance came and went without them, that explanation started to fall apart. And they were now officially considered at large, with Under Sheriff Michael McCabe later saying their attorneys had been unable to reach either of them by phone or text. I can get by phone, but you can't reach them by text. Right. You're in trouble. Well, reports also showed that earlier that day, the couple had withdrawn $4,000 from an ATM in Rochester Hills, turned off their cell phones, raising even more concern about where they had gone. And by the end of the night on the 3rd of December, United States Marshals issued wanted posters for both Jennifer and James and announced rewards of up to $10,000 for info that could lead to their arrest. Later on that night, 11:05 p.m., 30 December, police got a break when a business owner in Detroit, about 40 miles from Oxford, called in a tip after noticing a vehicle in his parking lot that matched the Crumbly's car. Why don't they drive north to Mount Pleasant or something?
Right. It's going down fucking...
Right. He also reported seeing Jennifer Crumbley nearby before she took off when she realized that she had been spotted, which prompted officers to respond within about 20 minutes, set up a perimeter around the area. And after searching through nearby buildings, they finally found both Jennifer and James around 2 a.m., 4th of December, hiding in a first-floor room inside a commercial building. This is where they were taken into custody without any incident. And later that day, during a press conference, the Oakland County Sheriff, he said that investigators believe someone had helped the couple get access to the building, and that additional charges could potentially be filed against the parents related to their flight, along with charges against whoever assisted them. And he also noted that when they were arrested, the Crumbleys, unarmed, appeared extremely distressed, and there was no clear sign they had been planning to turn themselves in. The person believed to have helped them later came forward through an attorney. He identified himself as an Oakland County resident who operated a business in that same building, claiming he did not even know that they were wanted at the time he allowed them in.
Sure.
Though he did not go into detail about how he knew them. And while authorities described him as cooperative during questioning, they still carried out a search of his home in Troy and seized multiple digital devices as part of investigation.
That's crazy.
I don't remember this part.
Well, Jennifer and James, they were arraigned December 4th, were both entered not guilty pleas. They were each given a bond set at $500,000, while at the same time, federal authorities began looking into whether any federal laws had been violated in connection.
Now they want to get involved.
Right. In connection with James purchasing the handgun for his son. And as the case moved forward, all three members of the family ended up being held at the Oakland County Jail. Though, because of the situation, they were kept completely separate, clearly.
Right.
Placed in isolation, monitored under suicide watch, not allowed any contact with each other for an indefinite period.
Damn.
At a probable cause conference December 14th, the court pushed their preliminary examination back to February 8th.
That's fucked up.
And scheduled a bond hearing for January 7th. But when that came, the judge agreed with prosecutors and refused to reduce their bond.
Right.
Pointing to both of the seriousness of the charges and the concern that they were flight risk, clearly. As the legal process stretched on and on and on, the case continued to develop into 2024. That's when a judge ruled that Jennifer and James would be tried separately.
Oh.
With the first trial set to begin January 23rd, 2024, after the two had already spent more than 2 years in jail.
Wow.
Jennifer, her trial wrapped up first, concluding February 6th, followed by James's March 14th. And in both cases, the outcome was the same. Juries found both of them guilty on all 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, marking a rare and highly significant moment. They just set a precedent right there, boys.
Right there.
Yeah. Just a few weeks later, April 9th, both were sentenced to a maximum penalty of 15 years in prison with possibility of parole after 10.
Oh, wow.
Jennifer, she was sent to the Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility, and James went to the Bellamy Creek Correctional Facility. Even after the sentencing, the legal battle continued. December 2nd, 2024, Jennifer Crumbley's new appellate attorneys, they filed a motion seeking either to have her conviction dismissed or to be granted a new trial, arguing several points, which included that prosecutors had failed to disclose a confidential proffer agreement with school officials, which they claimed should have been included under Brady disclosure rules, while also challenging the logic of the prosecution case by pointing out what they described as conflicting theories of responsibility, since Ethan had been charged an adult while she was still being held accountable for failing to control him as a minor.
Right.
Along with claims that she had no legal duty to protect the victims, that the jury's instructions were flawed, and that she had received ineffective assistance of counsel. James's legal team followed with a similar appeal in April 2025, also argued that he didn't receive a fair trial because of the same undisclosed agreement. But June of 2025, Judge Cheryl Matthews denied both appeals, leaving convictions and sentences for both of these scumbags fully in place. I can't even say scumbags. I mean,
wow.
This is kind of unprecedented here. I mean, if anything, it's the father's fault.
Right.
I'll give him more than that.
Right. Wow. This question started mounting about how the school handled warning signs leading up to the shooting. Oxford Community Schools. Well, if I was Jennifer and James, I would sue the community schools for not prompting the district's attorney superintendent to announce that a third-party investigation was conducted to review what happened, while also saying he would recommend a full evaluation of the district's entire system to the school board. But that decision quickly became controversial because Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel had offered for her office to lead the investigation. That's already funny shit there. Which is an offer the district declined in favor of hiring an outside firm.
Right.
A move that Nessel openly criticized during an interview, saying she did not believe it was the appropriate approach and expressing skepticism about whether the findings would ever be made public. At the very same time, more serious questions were being raised about actions taken on the day of the school shooting of itself. And on the 6th of December, prosecutor Karen McDonald stated that School officials had legal grounds to search Ethan's backpack
Well, I mean, yeah.
and locker after concerns were raised about his behavior that morning. But for reasons that were never clearly explained, no search was conducted. And she made it clear that potential charges against school staff were not off the table. And just 2 days later, 8th of December, Nessel announced that her office would move forward with its own review of the situation, regardless of the district's earlier decision. She said that the state's top law enforcement official, she believed that it was necessary to take a closer look at what happened in the lead up to the shooting.
Days after, the legal fallout began to build quickly. December 9th, 2021, multiple survivors filed 2 separate lawsuits totaling $100 million against Oxford Community Schools and several of its employees, alleging that the tragedy could have been prevented
Easily.
and that school officials failed to act on warning signs, including threats posted on social media that had reportedly been brought to their attention beforehand. Just 1 day later, December 10th, an attorney representing 2 of those survivors went a step further. They asked a judge to order the district to preserve social media pages and other potential evidence that she claimed had been deliberately deleted after the shooting,
No.
which is a request the judge approved.
Okay.
The district responded almost immediately. December 14th, the community schools filed a motion to dismiss the original $100 million lawsuit.
I bet they did.
They argued the survivor's attorney had rushed to file it without proper due diligence, suggested it was done more for public attention than legal merit, even claiming it was an attempt to, quote-unquote, get on the news. Well, that's pretty fucked up. I hope all these parents took their kids out of the school.
Right.
They also raised concerns about one of the individuals named in the lawsuit as a former dean of students who they said should have not been included, pointing out that because his name had not been removed, he had received death threats and suffered serious emotional distress.
Aw.
And the district's legal team ultimately argued that he should be dropped from the case entirely, if he wasn't there,
Right.
and that sanctions should be considered against the attorney who filed the suit in the first place.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
A legal fight continued to grow in the weeks that followed. January 8, 2022, survivors filed an updated $100 million lawsuit that expanded the case significantly, adding 11 new counts and bringing in additional school officials, including the principal and other administrators.
Wouldn't the principal have been included in the first one?
Accusing them of gross negligence and arguing that their actions, or lack of, directly caused serious and lasting physical and emotional trauma, with the lawsuit claiming that officials were aware of troubling behavior from Ethan that very day. The district pushed back strongly against those accusations, and on the 19th of January, the superintendent issued a statement disputing key points in the lawsuit. He said that the school officials had not discovered or had ever been told about Crumbly showing ammo to others, and they were unaware of any social media activity, which is probably a lie, and that all tips submitted through the OK2SAY system in November of 2020. Okay to say.
Okay.
And any tips that submitted through the Okay to Say system in November 2021 had been passed along to law enforcement and investigated. While also, just because they passed on to law enforcement, the school should still be able to see that.
Right. And they
did.
Right.
While also clarifying that an earlier incident involving a jar containing a baby bird's head in a school bathroom had been tied to a different student.
Oh, dude, what do you got going on there, Oxford? Jeez.
Wow. And he also added that Ethan had met with a counselor and the dean of students before the shooting. He had not met with a higher level administrators or restorative practices coordinator. Isn't the dean of students and a counselor high enough? Or at least a counselor.
Meaning not principals.
Right. And although it did not directly relate to decisions made...
So they're throwing the other guys under the bus.
Right. Oh, my goodness. And although it did not directly relate to decisions made before the shooting, the superintendent also pointed out that the school's principal and assistant principals ran toward the sound of gunfire. That doesn't change the fact.
Right.
Wow. Ran toward... I'm sorry. It's not funny, but it is. They ran toward the sound of gunfire to try to help the injured and locate the shooter. As the lawsuits moved forward, the district asked a federal judge on the 24th of January to pause the case until the criminal trials of Crumbly and his parents were finished. They were arguing that the civil case could interfere with those proceedings. And ultimately, on the 6th of 2023 of March, on March 6, 2023, a state judge dismissed the lawsuits against Oxford Community Schools and its staff. He ruled that they were protected by governmental immunity and that Ethan Crumbly, not the school, was a direct cause of the shooting. That's bullshit.
As you can imagine, the impact on the students and the community was immediate and overwhelming, with many of them left traumatized, not just from the loss of classmates, but from what they had personally seen, which included bodies lying in the halls, something that just doesn't fade away, obviously. In response, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services stepped in to provide support for students and their families, while local officials also began allocating resources, with the Oakland County Board of Commissioners approving more than $3.2 million in aid by January of 2022 to help deal with the aftermath. In the days right after the shooting, Oxford Community Schools shut down entirely for the rest of the week. When plans were put in place to reopen, they were cautious and structured, starting with what was described as a soft opening that included a visible law enforcement presence, trained clinicians on site to provide immediate support if needed. And as part of broader changes announced in December 2021, the district said that once classes resumed after the holiday break, middle and high school students have to wear clear backpacks. Elementary students, they got to keep their bags stored in lockers or cubbies throughout the day.
Oh, wow.
But even with those plans in motion, Oxford High School itself remained closed longer than the rest, with students attending classes in alternate buildings until January 24th of 2022.
Right.
As the community slowly tried to find some sense of normal again. I'm surprised they even went back.
Crazy.
In the immediate aftermath, the community came together in visible and emotional ways, as you might expect. 3 prayer services held on the night of the shooting drew hundreds of people. While outside of school, a grown memorial took shape filled with flowers, candles, stuffed animals left behind for the victims. Just a week later, Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, a candlelight vigil was held at Michigan State University, who would suffer their own shooting not long after, right? To honor those who had been killed. As the days went on, tributes continued to spread beyond Oxford, including an online petition to rename the school stadium after Tate Meyer, one of the students who lost his life. And across the sports world, teams and players found ways to show support, with the Wolverines of Michigan football team wearing a memorial patch during the Big Ten championship game. While the Detroit Lions and Minnesota Vikings honored the victims during their December 5th game, they also wore special patches along with shirts and hats dedicated to the victims.
Oxford strong.
Lions player Jalen Elliott even altered his number 42 jersey to include Tate Meyer's name. Well, at the same time, efforts to support the families began almost immediately, which included a GoFundMe started by a relative of Madison Baldwin to help cover funeral expenses, while her family created a hashtag using her name to highlight acts of kindness done in her memory. Beyond that, additional fundraisers popped up across online platforms, local businesses, community-driven efforts selling items like shirts to help with medical bills, funeral costs, and other needs, with the phrase Oxford Strong becoming a unifying message used both in fundraising and across social media, as well as for a drop-off location set up by the township where people could leave cards and messages of support. December 12th, the organization March for Our Lives, they even held an event in Oxford, bringing together students and community members to share experiences and begin working through what had happened.
Perfect. Love it. In the days immediately following the shooting, the ripple effect spread far beyond Oxford, Michigan, as copycat threats began surfacing across Metro Detroit on the 1st of December.
I remember that. It was all throughout the state.
Yeah. Many school districts shut down for that day, just out of caution, with Sheriff Michael Bouchard later saying that at least 60 schools were impacted just from those early threats. And with a matter of days, the situation escalated even further, because that very next Monday, which was the 3rd, a total of 519 schools across 70 different districts in Michigan and 6 other states had closed due to similar threats, showing just how quickly fear had spread. And this is just after everybody was going back to school from COVID. While law enforcement made it clear they're taking every threat seriously, with Bouchard promising investigations, and Oakland County prosecutor Karen McDonald warning that anyone making threats against schools would face criminal charges. The pattern did not stop there. December 17th, 2021, schools across the country dealing with another wave of threats, many of them spreading through social media, leading some districts to close again as a precaution, while others increased police presence on the campuses. Even after determining that many of the threats were not credible, and in some cases were...
But didn't Oxford just say that this threat wasn't credible too? So
right. In some cases were traced back to individuals in completely different states.
Yeah.
Prompting police departments and school officials nationwide to issue statements outlining both their response and the consequences for those responsible. Meanwhile, you had TikTok, where a large number of the threats were reportedly circulating, said it had been removing as many of the videos as they could and was working alongside law enforcement. Even years later, the case continued to show up in disturbing ways. July 2024, it was reported that Thomas Matthew Crooks, who attempted to assassinate Donald Trump, had researched Ethan Crumbley and his family before carrying out his own attack, in which he shot Trump in the ear and killed a bystander.
Yeah. Well, as we all know, at the time of purchase and the shooting, Michigan, they didn't have a statewide law requiring firearms to be securely stored in homes with minors. Even though federal law made it illegal for someone under 18 to possess a handgun, that's different.
Right.
State law did place some responsibility on adults to prevent access if they knew a child posed a risk. That gap became a central issue in the case, which we all know both of the parents got charged.
Yep.
The case also triggered a broader policy response. April 2023, Whitmer signed new legislation requiring safe storage of firearms in homes with children or prohibited individuals, along with universal background checks for all gun purchases and the expansion of extreme risk protection orders, allowing courts to temporarily remove firearms from people considered a danger to themselves or others, with advocacy groups pointing to the Oxford case as a clear example of why those measures were needed.
Right.
Often citing data showing that a large percentage of school shooters obtained weapons from their own homes, arguing that the stronger storage laws could help prevent some similar tragedies.
Right.
But at the same time, critics push back on that approach, arguing that focusing on parental liability and new storage requirements risk overlooking other key factors,
Right.
which included untreated mental health issues
That's it.
and the deliberate intent of the shooter.
I mean, come on. The mental health issue has been going on we've been saying this about every serial killer, anybody from the time of the beginning.
Well, they also pointed out Michigan already had laws in place which addressed negligent access before 2023. That individuals determined to carry out violence can sometimes bypass storage rules, especially in cases like this where there were no prior criminal records or legal barriers to the purchase.
Right.
While the convictions have been seen by some as setting a new precedent for holding parents accountable, the larger debate remains unresolved over how much these kinds of policy changes actually do reduce the likelihood of future incidents.
I mean, this isn't Minority Report here, guys, where we have future crimes be getting given to the police force.
I mean, I don't agree of taking people's guns if you can deem them. You can say anything to deem them a threat to themselves or other people. That's going into some scary territory.
That's
right
just
there.
like indictment. You can indict a ham sandwich.
It's true.
I mean, it's just ridiculous. Well, when it's all said and done, what happened at Oxford High School is not just remembered for the violence inside those hallways, but for everything surrounding it. The warning signs that were ignored, the decisions that were made in the hours and days leading up, and the unprecedented legal fallout that followed. This is where not only the shooter, but his own parents were held criminally responsible. First time in history, leaving behind a case that forced people to confront uncomfortable questions about accountability, responsibility, and prevention. In the end, this was not a story about something that came out of nowhere. It was a story about how a chain of small moments, missed chances, and critical decisions all came together in the worst possible way, and how the consequences of what could ripple far beyond a single day can change in one single second.
Yeah, I mean, I say so. I would say so, but that last thing that you just said, it's not a story about something that came out of nowhere. It was a story about how to chain of small events, missed chances, critical decisions all came together in the worst possible way, which we've said on literal every single mass shooting thing that we've covered here, literal every single serial killer that we've covered here, literally every single freaking crime thing that we've covered here that's got the same sentence that ends it.
So in a way, I can kind of see how the parents were charged because they were told to have their kid get evaluated, but they didn't. And then I can see how the school got sued because there was complaints that very day of the shooting of this dude got weapons and they did nothing. Didn't even search his backpack or locker.
And why didn't they call the cops?
Right. And then
I've heard of similar things even before this shooting happened.
Right.
Where somebody makes a threat and the cops were called in to search backpacks and all that shit, dude.
Right. And not to mention they have previous social media posts. You got all kinds of stuff. I mean, so this is kind of one of those unique cases where I don't know if we'll ever see parents getting charged again, but this case...
There was also a story how after the school called the mom, after they found that note with like the gun and whatever...
And she laughed it off or something.
She said, she texted him, LOL, I'm not mad. You just got to try not to get caught next time. Like, what the fuck, dude?
Right.
Shit like that. I mean, clearly piece of shit parents.
Right.
Clearly piece of shit
So
parents.
in this case, I kind of agree with what the parents got charged with, but you're crossing a fine line there.
You're setting a precedent right there.
Right.
Or maybe it's a good precedent because maybe parents will pay more attention then, I guess, huh?
In any event, this all could have been avoided.
I feel like we've said that a million times.
Right.
Either or. That's the Oxford school shooting.
Too close to home, boys.
Yeah, we're right in our neck of the woods, people. Yeah, that's that. Next week, we'll be back for another episode of Remastered where we'll take a look at, I don't remember what it was, but We're in the actual true crime phase of that. After last week, we just did the Walk of Death, which was, I don't know if that was preventable for per se, but definitely was a crazy dude. Well, actually, it was preventable because he got some messed up stuff that happened in the army. Dude.
Right.
So, we'll have stories like that on our remastered, and then you already know what we do. We got another round of serial killing, and then we're right back to the mafia. So, like, subscribe, comment, give us a share with your friends, and give us a review. We'll see you next week for more Outlaws, Gunslingers. We're the month of Michigan.
Night.